Hi, I'm Adelina Bajrami, and I'm joined here by my dad, Remzi.
Hi.
Lisa, Nick
Hi,
Chugg,
Lisa.
Nick Chugg, and
Hi.
Nick Lever,
Hello there.
and I'll just be in and out of this conversation.
Hey, Nick, Lever.
Yes.
We haven't spoken in a while, actually. Lisa, the rest of this group, we had a conversation a couple of days ago. We had some trouble trying to record it, and so we didn't record it. But we had a nice conversation. It was great. I wish we had recorded it. However, have you had a chance to read? Obviously, you probably read the original introduction to the Common Plan.
I have. Yep.
We recently updated it. I mean, we took out some of the fluff. Let's start from the beginning with just talking about the actual reward system itself. Does anyone want to start? The last conversation went much smoother than this one. I'm sure we'll pick it up though.
Look, I'm happy to sort of put in my my opinion early on this. My view with where I kind of saw the thing that I'm doing with Organised Revolution, where it's a little bit different from you guys, is that I think you guys are putting in a lot of effort up front to try and solve some of these problems. When, like, for example, this conversation's an interesting one, but I'm not an economic expert. Like, I can't really contribute, a significant amount of input to, what might be the solution for tomorrow. I think that, there's much more educated and qualified people to have that conversation. My view is we need to get people to be moving in that direction so that, we can have those conversations, we can draw in the right people to kind of come up with the solutions for tomorrow, come up with what those economic systems might be. That's partly my view on it. Remzi, I was really impressed with the poll that you put on the group this week on Organised Revolution, because, that generates interest with people, and you can see already that people are coming up with some solutions on there that were, outside what you initially put up there.
Oh,
and
great.
I think at the moment the universal basic living payment has come up as the number one priority.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a really good way to kind of start generating interest. My only concern and I think I probably mentioned this to you right at the beginning, is that you guys you talk about the reset and what it's going to be like kind of after a reset. My biggest concern is, how do you get to that reset? How do we, get that critical momentum? How do you get that mass? And, what's going to actually trigger that off?
Yeah, we actually talked a little bit about that last time. In terms of the economic part about it, there's a lot of debate in the world about the political, but that's pretty much straightforward. For the most part, we already know that people want personal freedom. They want to be empowered. They want to think what they want, to say what they want, to control their own body. So those freedoms are pretty universal. I don't think there should be, or really is, much debate about it, even though that seems to be what the media focuses on. In terms of the economic portion of it, the main problem with the existing currency, the way I see it, is that it allows for people to have too much power and too much control because they're able to pay people. So whenever you can pay people, whenever you can exchange money between individuals, there's always going to be corruption, there's always going to be problems with power. So if you can remove the properties of currency, of transferability between individuals, then you can remove, coercion and power between the individuals. There are other discussions. The universal basic income we talked about a little bit about last time. So if somebody else might want to chime in here, I guess we'll start with why universal basic income is good, so or bad.
I think we have a few issues with universal basic income, in that the right wing are trying to grab elements of universal basic income to ensure more our consumptive society. So there's a couple of models that I've seen online, and some I really like. Others I see have issues. They're just a continuation of a similar theme of increasing consumption. But obviously with automation coming into play, I believe about 25% of the population is going to be unemployed, they are calculating, by 2030, maybe even sooner, 2025. We are going to need some way to I suppose, purchase resources, and how do you do that when you don't have an income?
Right. That's what I liked about the reward system is that you don't have to worry about producing an income. Everything that you do that is good, you're automatically producing an income just by living and contributing and doing things that are good for yourself, which in turn are good for the community. You know, every time you take a class, you get paid. Every time you play sports, you get paid. So the community can determine what activities are beneficial to individuals and what are worthy of getting, receiving reward and to what level. And so, but an individual would essentially be free to earn as much as possible.
But
So,
what I see is you're creating a democratic ability to be put onto our economy. So people can then choose where the resources are going, or they have more say. And you're obviously still going to let communities make those decisions locally at a state level, or if you still have states, and at a national level in terms of your community credits that you're talking about, or awards. Don't really want to change the subject on you, but when Nick brought up some issues before, I thought that one of our biggest issues is actually breaking through and getting the information across to people. And I love your idea. I love the rewards idea. I think it's one of the best ideas I've seen so far in terms of basic income. How do we get the message across to everyone? And the other thing that I see is in our current system, they are really rigid and they're inflexible. And the only constant we have in this world is change. And so in implementing a system like this, I think we need to be adaptable. We need to be able to be changeable and flexible. So obviously giving people their choices is great, but we also need to be prepared to be flexible in the way that this goes, because it's not going to suit everyone. And some other people, as Nick said, might have some great ideas that actually improve this. They were my things that I thought of this morning. In particular, trying to get the message across to everyone, to break through seems to be the hardest thing. And Nick's, I see on his organised religion, he's already smashed it up to like 10,000. I think you've got 10,000 people in the group now.
Yeah, nearing 13 at the moment, actually.
It's incredible.
And
I still don't know how you do that.
I run my page, which is, I'm lucky I don't pay any money Facebook to get extra people or boosts, but I'm lucky to have a bit over 2,000. So
incredible.
How do we break through all the information that's out there and create something that people can get behind? And for me, we've got to make people aware. There's not enough people in this world that are aware. They're still stuck in their normal paradigms. And humans are notoriously difficult to change. So that's where I would like to sort of...
The pitch to them has to be what's in it for them. That was one of the reasons why we were trying to create this application, by the way, is because once you have the application and then you go on there, you answer a couple of questions and you see how much of the new currency you might have in this new system. And then you're able to then type in and input the data for the property section, meaning you can finally secure your title for where you live and or where you might want to live, and all that data gets built in. It becomes a little bit real. So realistically, we're probably going to need some type of a PR marketing campaign that can deliver the message in a clear video, probably, that can be easily digested by people, so that we don't have to educate people about the economic system. We don't have to educate people about the evils of capitalism and all of that. We don't have to do that. We just have to give them something that is a vision of something that's better than what they have now, I think. And if we can do that, the message can spread. And of course, if we can get that and get a person like a Kim Kardashian or somebody famous to spread it to more people, maybe you can get some traction. But who knows? I think the video is probably the best way, because we know that videos do go viral. And you can even use tools like Facebook and whatnot to spread the message. So over time, hopefully somebody will create, maybe it'll be us, I don't know, but something like that would require some expertise and or some money to do. So hopefully it'll get there, but not right now. Yeah, Nick. So when I released that poll on your website, I released it on mine too, and
Yeah, sure.
I didn't even know that it was possible to allow other people to add more. When I first did that, I was like, oh, people are only going to add maybe one or two more options. So it was a pleasant surprise to hear all those ideas. But for the most part, most of those ideas are along the same lines. I mean, you can see that basically what people want is just more control and more equality.
Yeah, really interesting. I'd like to go back to Nick's point around the flexibility of stuff, and it probably ties in a little bit with what I was saying earlier about sort of how do you get to that breakthrough point. One of the things that I found that I was doing early on with the Organised Revolution page is, I'm a big advocate for education. I'm a big advocate for direct democracy, but I think some of those issues become a little bit divisive, and I felt that it was important to start to strip away some of those divisive elements that kind of that people weren't perhaps even sure what it meant, and just keep it to the really simple stuff, so that you can build that critical mass, so that everyone kind of goes, yeah, I get this. There's so much inequality in the world at the moment, and people are feeling that. People see it. And so if what I've tried to do is to stick to that kind of core element, and that brings people in, and that helps, I think, develop the critical mass. Now, the stuff on, the building of the group on that I've got with Organised Revolution, I mean, to be honest, that's not organic growth. That's me adding in people that I think might be interested, and moderating the group so that the retention rate stays high. And the other thing too with the group is that, I mean, I'm trying to moderate 60 to 75 submissions for posts a day at the moment. So there's a lot of content that's coming in. That saves me a lot of time in terms of producing content.
Oh yeah.
But obviously, we need to make sure that the content that comes through is as factual as possible and as relevant, so that people kind of stay, the retention rate remains fairly high with it. So back to what I'm trying to say is, it's, for me, it's about drawing on what is important and what is going to best tick the button or press the buttons for people in terms of relevance for inequality. In Australia at the moment, we've got a very big issue that's kind of come up with the pay rate of the CEOs in the country. Our postal CEO, earns a phenomenal amount of money. He's just resigned because of the public scrutiny with it. So now would be a really good time for us to kind of, perhaps put out there some of those solutions that we see on that poll. For example, the adoption of a fair pay ratio. So, the top earners would earn no more than, 10 or even 20 times whatever the lowest income is. I think people could relate to that now because of some of the issues that we're seeing kind of in Australia at the moment. So that's where I can see potential for building some momentum.
I think when we also look at both sides of politics, there are some unifying themes such as education, health, most of them the environment. And those things also are generally represented by this left-right duality in our political system. They're always hitting each other against each other, which is not going to solve the world. But, So looking at inequality is probably a major one. I'd say health and education are two other things that everyone will get behind. And I think if we look at those basic premises of, the driving things that we need to live a comfortable, decent life, then you're going to unify people because everyone has those needs and desires.
Now, hey, Nick, was the CEO you mentioned of the post office, is your post office like ours? Is it government run?
It's a government subsidiary, but it's run independent of the government, and then any profits that they get, they pay back into the government.
Interesting.
So, look, in terms, it is a commercial organisation. It has commercial targets, and that's how they could the board justified paying this guy. I can't remember, Nick, was it 5 million Australian dollars or something?
Yeah, over 5.6, I think it was.
Yeah. So, and, that's 10 times the amount that the Prime Minister earns here. So, and, a lot more than what I think your female head of the postal service over there gets. So it looked like a ridiculous figure, but if you look at it from a commercial entity, it was performing, etc. But, we talk about, we talk about the pub test in Australia, would this be okay if you went into the pub and asked people, is this kind of salary okay? And, around the bar, people will go, no, it's not. This is ridiculous. And I think, that's where we can start having these conversations with people and say, look, we understand that CEOs have got a tough job and they've got, a commercial outcome they're trying to achieve. But $5 million, that's... how many workers could you put on for that?
I would caution against having too much conversation about that. In tackling inequality, there's this idea that if you prevent a certain group of individuals from achieving wealth or a lot of money, that somehow it's because what would you rather have? A system where some people are able to get a lot of wealth and then a lot of people are poor, or do you want everyone to be poor? So you're going to get that argument from the right. They're going to say, well, you just don't want, you just want everyone to be poor. And so that's like the same argument that you get sometimes with socialism or capitalism, that they think that the idea is that we should all suffer. They're misunderstanding that there's a third possibility there, which is we should all, have plenty, that we can all have enough without having to have extravagant, opulent wealth and power and control. Those, I don't believe anyone should have massive power and control. The idea that we have these presidents and these so-called representatives that are making these massive decisions on behalf of millions and hundreds of millions of people is ridiculous to me. When we have the tools nowadays to instantly gauge the mood and the opinion of the people, we're not even using them. Heck, in America, we're so backwards, we're using voting machines from God knows when that are completely corrupt, and they're all different. It's a mess. So I would caution against attacking rather than trying to showing an alternative that is actually beneficial to everybody. So that's
socialism contains so many negative connotations.
It does.
And I mentioned this last time. Let's reframe it, rephrase it. Call it something like economic democracy or democratic economics. To tie that in with Nick's idea, have the people set CEO wage. And I think you'll find that most people will go, well, we don't really want them having more than 10 times of whatever the limit is, and you leave those decisions up to the people.
But you can only do that perhaps with a government organization, state. You're going to have a tough time to try to impose limits on private companies. Say, like, who are we to determine how much the president of Microsoft or Amazon or Google should earn? How is that? How is that a democracy when they're so-called a private corporation?
They're run like a feudal system. There is no democracy within a corporation.
Correct. I agree with that. But we're not even having those conversations in America, so much so that I saw this meme the other day, and it shows the disparity, I'm pulling it up right now, of the difference between the average worker's pay and the CEO pay. And of course, America, we're the worst. Here it is. Japan 11-1, Germany 12-1, Italy 20-1, Canada 20-1. It doesn't show Australia, but anyway, then it goes to Venezuela 50-1, and then United States 475-1. We're killing it. We're not even close. So we're so far from having that conversation in this country. It's a non-starter practically. Those guys, they've gone so far ahead that it's almost impossible now to rein them in. We can't rein in capitalism in America. If some massive change from that regard, any government solution in terms of controlling equitable pay, it ain't going to come from the U.S. That's for sure.
Well, don't you think that it's more likely to come from the US because you've got such inequality?
No, because the people who are currently in power are the ones who are secretly promoting it. Actually, so are the Democrats. I mean, we didn't get to this point because only the Republicans were in charge. The truth is, the corporations and the way that we've structured the our democracy in this country, and the way that we've structured our Senate and the representatives, and allowed money to essentially write laws. Corporations nowadays, the people in the Senate and the representatives, their job is basically to write laws, to take input from their constituents, and then write laws that will then modify and make rules so that it'll benefit the people. But in reality, what's happening is the lobbyists, who have a lot of money, of course, a lot of brain power, lawyers and public relations and marketing people, and they're writing the policies and giving it to the representatives and the senators directly, and they're passing it. Boom. Why? Because they're doing it under the guise of helping the corporations, because that way they create jobs, and that way they can help the community. And so everything's about money and jobs in this country, nothing else. And they're not going to rein in the CEOs.
But you're highlighting this barrier to change, which is the current political system in America. Is that not the same barrier for change that is going to stop?
Oh, not at all, because we're basically saying that the idea that a person it should be allowed to own resources privately that should be public. So we're trying to change the model. So we're not even talking about inequality. I don't care if a surgeon gets paid more than me in Common Planet, as long as I have a place to live, education and opportunities to live my life and control, and no one else can control me or my community. I'm okay with that. I'm cool. There's this one anarchist that I've been watching on YouTube. His name is Larkin Rose, and he makes the point of that there's a lot of psychopaths and bad people in the world. We know this, right? Like Hitler was, like Donald Trump kind of is. And so the problem is when you allow a psychopath to have that much power and to manipulate the law, and then of course have the police and the military enforce his will, a lot of people get killed, and it does a lot of harm. But if that psychopath only had the power for himself, then how much damage can they really do before we take them out? I mean, they can't really kill that many people or do that much harm before we rein them in. But when you allow a psychopath to have that much power, that's where true evil happens. So in Common Planet, you would have no more power over me than nobody would have power over me. I would be able to, I would have my own house without owning the house. Essentially, I would have free title to it. Opportunity.
But how are you going to get to common planet with the current political system? How do you break that system?
Well, this is actually why we called it EarthVote to begin with. Our idea was that essentially, I mean, how do you gauge the mood of the people? And a poll is kind of a good way of doing that. And so our idea with EarthVote was that if somehow we can find alternatives. Our thought was, if we can find alternatives and then we can present them to people and then have them essentially vote on it, that the will of the people can be made real just by virtue of them wanting it, so to speak. So that was our naive vision, of course. Obviously, it's not going to be this easy, and we're just starting. But we did talk a little bit about the how the other day, and Nick mentioned that the UBI is a part of that. Perhaps you can get to that point by doing a UBI within capitalism. Maybe if enough people get enough money throughout the world, then they would have the free time to finally educate themselves and look at, hey, we've taken this step, why not go another step further?
Well, that to me is, we need to raise people's awareness, because the majority of people, they're listening to mainstream media. Mm-hmm. They don't get exposed to these ideas. And hence why I was sort of talking about propaganda and media relations last time, is how do you create that momentum? How do you get people engaged and create this momentum. Because when you start, you can see how memes go viral, how videos go viral. Ideas go viral as well.
Correct.
So,
well, if I can just explain a little bit of the application. So by having an application on your phone, our initial thought process was that we would have a conversion table there for the reward. So all you would do is you go in there, you type in your age, and you type in the value of your current assets, and immediately the application will tell you how much reward you would have in the new system. And so obviously it's not real at the moment because no one is accepting reward in the world. It's not a real currency. However, it becomes real because you see how much you would have, and all of a sudden you kind of take ownership to that. And then you couple that with, with the property portion of it. And the interesting thing with the property portion of it is that could be made real if enough people can spread the application and begin to choose their home and see what's available and begin to have that idea. It can become possible. The nice thing about the property part of the data is that we can input the data from the public records that exist today, like through Zillow or Trulia or one of those apps here in America. I'm sure you guys have similar apps in Australia and other countries. Property data, and of course it can also be input directly by the user. For example, I can say where I live, my address, and what I think my home is worth. And so the data can be input with only a couple of questions.
So we're going on the premise that we're trying to create a better system that's going to appeal to people more than our current.
I don't know who the current system appeals to, except for perhaps people who have corporations and/or who are making a consistent good salary. I explained it to one of my friends like this. He has $100,000 in the bank, right? And middle-aged guy like myself, and I try to explain to him. I said, look, by the time that $100,000 today, can you retire on that $100,000 today? He said, no, absolutely not. Of course not. I said, you're right. Okay, but what about about 20 years from now when we go to retire? Let's say we have $1 million. Would $1 million be enough to retire on? Maybe it would be enough to retire on today, but certainly not in the future. Not 20 years from today, because of inflation and whatnot. We don't even know where the value of the dollar or your currency or anybody's currency is for that matter, because we live in a competitive capitalistic system that with competing interests. My country could go down. Who knows? So there's that. So there's no security. It doesn't matter, even if you're doing great, even if you're getting a good salary, even if you have a lot of money in the bank, it might not be enough. And so there is a lack of security within this system. Regardless if you're either suffering now or you're doing okay, that doesn't mean that you're safe. So lacking security is a big one, I think. There's no security in this world right now.
Not under our competitive model.
No, not at all. And I don't think there ever can be.
I don't think, just the way the world operates, I don't think we're ever going to be truly secure. There's always going to be issues, natural disasters, but in terms of our society and having backups, I think there's so much we could do to improve that. Creating the system, creating a better system. You're currently working on the economic side of things.
Yeah.
What about looking at a few of the other sides of things? Like this sort of sparks my interest in terms of social engineering and reorganising society.
How do you mean?
To function better. Such as the cradle to cradle philosophy that I brought up last.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Food equals waste. So in terms of the environmental side of things.
Food, right.
You've pretty much covered the economic side of things, and there's plenty of solutions out there for environmental. The social engineering side of things and getting people behind this is, I think, one of the biggest steps.
But
it's going to be the hardest step.
Are not every single one of those limited and or controlled by the economic today?
They are today, yes.
So that's what I mean. A system like this where you empower people to do what they think is best on their own conscience and get paid for it would solve those problems, Nick. You're going to get people who are naturally already involved with food, the people who have expertise will have more of a say versus, say, a Monsanto. Today, Monsanto has a lot of power because they have money, they have lawyers. I mean, they rule, they dominate. And so they won't dominate in this system, because the truth is, who's going to want to work for them? Who's going to want to continue to lie when now you might actually suffer the consequences for lying and doing intentional harm? But today you don't suffer that. You can work for Monsanto, be a lawyer or some scientist, and get paid to lie and produce bad data and bad seeds, and you'll never go to jail. And no one will ever target you. Heck, they might target the corporation, probably not. And even if they did, they will win. The state is okay with that because they'll make some money, right? Every time a corporation does something wrong, the state loves it. The government loves it because they're able to extract, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars from these bad actors, and no one ever goes to jail. The corporation doesn't stop; they continue. So everything, in my opinion, everything is starts from the economic. Until you structure a new economic game, you're going to get the same output. The question that we had last year was, once we figured out, the reward system, the property solution, then we were trying to figure out if what we're calling them is, we call them groups. So any corporation or school, any group of people who are endeavoring to either produce a product or a service, we call them groups. So if they're no longer going to be producing or servicing for a profit, then the question that we were trying to figure out was, how do they get the reward currency to be able to buy the raw materials? So for example, a school, majority of their cost in today's world, of course, is labor. And because in Common Planet, the labor just gets paid directly to the individual from the system rather than from taxes, the majority of their cost is labor, but they still have material costs. They still have to buy equipment, paper, maybe some new material every now and then. So how do they get currency in order to buy their raw materials? And so that question took us like 6 months to figure out. And the solution that we came down to was, so it was one paragraph. I can't believe we were able to condense it down to one paragraph. So here's the idea, was that we would create a different account for each individual called community credit. So the way that would work is that each city would get about 50 community credits per person, from which, democratically, then they would be allowed to distribute that reward currency to whatever group they wanted, whatever the community wanted. In addition, each individual would also get 50 community credits. So it's essentially a taxation system, but again, just like the reward comes directly to the people from the system, so do the taxes, rather than, say, through a private bank that's creating this via, a debt instrument. And then of course the individual would also be able to self-direct those community credits to any group. So if you wanted to fund your school, you're essentially doing a civic crowdfunding is what we like to call it. So if your school would say, hey, look, we have a budget this year, we need to buy this many supplies according to the current prices of the things, we anticipate needing, say, $1 million reward. And so, various people will then begin to fund that school. And then that way you can self-direct your community credit to whatever group that interested you. And I just wanted to get you up to speed. Yeah, Nick.
Include things like hospitals, Remzi?
Any group, yeah. Hospital is a group, right? Any place where it's not you. You have your own personal reward account that you use to buy your own personal things for. But groups, it can be anything. It could be a group of engineers. It could be a group of lawyers. It could be a group of doctors or hospital, whatever it is. They all have a budget. But by getting rid of the labor cost, which is the majority of the cost in the world, labor becomes an opportunity rather than a cost in Common Planet, meaning it's an unlimited resource. Today, we actually restrict people from participating in labor because somebody has to pay you, and usually there's not enough money, The neat thing with the community credit, though, guys, is that by having a community credit, you can eliminate essentially bad groups. If there's a group who is doing something bad in the community, rather than taking the time to make that activity, say, illegal, you can simply just not fund them. If enough people recognize that, hey, these guys are, they're not producing the best products. This other group in California has a better method, and they're able to satisfy the demand because they were able to improve production, and their methods are more environmentally friendly and renewable. And so this group here in Portland is now going to disappear because we're just not going to fund them anymore. And so without having to make it illegal, boom, they disappear. And so it's a means of getting the things that are better produced.
I think you're still going to get black markets.
Well, you can't have a black market, Nick. It's impossible because you can't exchange currency, you see? You're not
Well,
allowed.
people will make their own currency. They'll make their own way of trading.
How would you do it?
They'll work their way around it.
That would be illegal.
Pardon?
As soon as you get, if you begin to do that, you can suffer the
Yeah,
consequences.
but that's the point of a black market. It is illegal.
No.
I mean, if you look
a
at
black
drug,
market only exists today
for
because
example.
essentially, look, it's already allowed. We already have hundreds of different currencies. So using another currency or using another, or trying to use whatever currency you're using in the black market is perfectly logical. It's built into the system. In Common Planet, it doesn't exist. You have no incentive to do it even.
Yeah, but
and you have a
think
disincentive.
I need to give it a little bit more time to think through. But if you look at an issue
Give me a
about
specific example,
drugs,
like
for
drugs.
example.
There would be no black market for drugs because they would be completely legal. People will be able to do whatever they want. You don't have the right to control me, to tell me what I can put in my body. You don't have the right to control me, to tell me what kind of group I can start. I can start one if I want, and enough people agree, we're going to do it, and we're going to fund it. So there's no black market. It's
You're
open.
going to want to control people from doing negative things towards society.
Well, the only negative things in society would be somebody physically abusing another person, or somebody producing a weapon that might, with the intent to hurt somebody. But those are the only things that really need to be illegal. Nothing else needs to be illegal. The production of, if you wanted to produce a certain food or a drug, go ahead. I don't care. But if you wanted to introduce that drug into my food supply, you're going to jail. Now you're hurting people. You see. But if you're going to make that drug,
What if you wanted to introduce that drug into schools? How would you feel about that?
what do you mean introduce it to schools? They would be producing the drug, but if they're giving it to kids, obviously that's illegal. You can't, you still have rules of conduct, but the production of the drug is not illegal. Huh?
So who gets to take drugs? Just adults?
I guess it would be the decision of the adults and their parents, of the children. At some point, the parents have to be responsible, right? And so you can empower the parents, I believe, for the well-being of their own children. If you can't empower the parents, then maybe some other guardian. But ultimately, I think the parents should be responsible for their children. And as far as an adult's concerned, you're on your own, dude. Educate yourself. The information's there. It's not like it is today where people are producing negative or incorrect information to lie to you for profit. You can't do that in Common Planet. If you intentionally produce information that's intentionally lying, you're going to suffer the consequences because you lied. So in today's world, you don't suffer the consequences. Your corporation might pay a fine, but you don't, and you don't go to jail. Hell, you get promoted usually. You get rewarded. So you get rewarded to lie and to do evil. You want to manipulate the data on this drug? Go ahead, do it, so we can get it approved and sell more. In Common Planet, if you try to do that shit, you're going to go to jail personally because you did it. No one else told you to do it. You see, there's a difference. In today's world, you're not liable. We create these make-believe companies so that we can not be liable. That's why they're limited liability corporations. That's why they're no liability. I mean, you basically taking away the responsibility from you onto this fake entity. And therefore, evil happens. In Common Planet, that can't happen because the group is composed of self-acting, voluntary individuals. No one is telling you to produce that, to lie about the data in your drug lab. You're actively looking to make a drug to solve a problem. And if you do, you're going to get rewarded for that. And if you actively produce a drug that it kills people and you did it with intent and lying, you're going to get in trouble. And you'll be found out because your peers are going to lie. They're not going to cover. Why would a group of people, intentionally produce a drug and lie about it? They wouldn't. Because you'd be afraid of somebody ratting you out. I would. I mean, remember now, you already have everything you want. So, but in today's world, most of us don't have everything we want. And we're constantly in a state of lack of security. There's almost no security in this world. Zero. Even if you're a millionaire, you could easily become bankrupt. Right?
True.
Or homeless, for that matter. Shit. Last time, Nick, you weren't a part of the discussion, but I love the UBI. but I hate the UBI inside capitalism. And this is why I didn't click that UBI mark until much later, because I didn't want to not be a part of the club there. But I do think a universal basic income is necessary. But I also believe that a universal basic income by itself as a solution today is like adding fuel to the fire, in that we're playing a game of Monopoly, right? That's what the world is. It's a game of Monopoly. Some people or groups of people own the resources or the property, and they are extracting wealth through the labor of the people or wealth through the appreciation of capital, property appreciation. So a UBI is, to me, some people get really rich and they're owning everything, and then everyone else is pretty much losing their money really quickly. And then you see that a group of people have basically no money left. Now they've lost all their money, and so you're thinking, oh crap, okay, we have to continue, in order to continue playing the game, what are we going to do to make sure that we can involve these bastards? And so the idea comes, oh, hey, let's give them more money when they pass go. Okay, so we can extend the game. Okay, so fine. You give them $1,000 instead of $200 for passing go this time around. But as soon as they go, that money's gone immediately. Where does it go? It goes to the existing property and resource owners. And so the person still doesn't have a chance. You can't just keep feeding them crumbs just so they can give their money to the property owners. You didn't solve the problem. All you did is continue to play the same broken game. So the structure, the rules of the game are broken. No one should be owning property. No one should be owning resources. We should own them collectively as a group for the benefit of the people rather than for private profit. That's ridiculous to me. The idea that we should only do things that make a profit, perhaps it was necessary. Capitalism, let's give credit to capitalism for producing what it's produced, for getting us to where it's gotten us. However, now that we've built this beautiful system, let's change the rules of the game so that we can actually own all of these tools that we've built through all the evil of the past, and let's move forward. It's gotten us to this point. Maybe it was necessary. Maybe the previous generations had to suffer through this inequality and through this repression and wars. But I don't think we have to anymore.
I agree. It's getting there that seems to be the issue.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. Remzi, you speak well there. You've got some great points. But to me, I just keep coming from a marketing perspective.
For sure.
There's other people that have put solutions forward. Like, for example, I draw a reference to the, trying to think of the project. It'll come to me in a minute. But the Venus Project. Of the Venus Project.
Yes.
So, that's been out there for 10 or 15 years. And, it's a viable model, but it hasn't got anywhere near the critical momentum to get people to switch over. And, I think that we run a real risk of going to our graves still discussing what the future might look like, when, what's really required is that we tap into the energy of, people's discontent at the moment. And that's why I come back to America, because there's so many discontented people there because you have such inequality. We were feeling it in Australia. People want change. That's why they're voting for extreme right. That's why they're turning to, the more socialist models. They're not sure where to go with it. But, the appetite for change is really high at the moment. But, what needs to be presented are solutions that appeal to ordinary people, even middle-class people. Once you start telling people, about not owning their homes, they're going to run away from you. Sorry?
No, you do own. We're not. The idea is not to take anything away from anybody. You would own.
I know,
I
get that, but it's just, it's just everything needs to be marketed in a way that is appealing to people. I mean, as soon as you talk about new models, people fear it. People think, well, is that going to mean, and immediately you're going to get the opposition are going to say to us, these people want to take away your homes, and the current system is a massive media propaganda machine that we just don't have any means to compete with, and you get shut down within seconds
I
get
don't think they're even
told
gonna.
that we.
No, I disagree, Nick. They're not even gonna. They're not even gonna acknowledge us. I don't believe they can debate us. They'll never. The day that you see me or you or one of us on interviewed by these mainstream media is the day that they've lost. If I ever
No,
made
it's
it on
shut
mainstream
down.
media, it's over. It's never going to happen. The only way we're going to get any traction is through other private, and freedom fighters like ourselves. We're
Yeah.
never going to be invited to CNN or ABC. Never, never.
I was just thinking that they might do a climate change denial or, smoking isn't bad for you type media campaign. That's likely what you're going to end up against.
the best thing they could do is not even mention us. As soon as they mention us, that it piques an interest in the viewer, and the viewer might look it up, and they're gonna immediately recognize, hey, wait a minute, I actually agree with some of this stuff. So,
Quote me, ideas are bulletproof.
huh?
Quote
The ideas are, I think they're desirable by a lot of people. Once, who doesn't desire freedom? Who doesn't want control of their lives and security and opportunity? Who doesn't want that? Everybody.
Getting that message across to people.
Huh?
Getting that message to people.
Well, the only people who don't want that are the people who are currently masters, the current people who are currently in control of their lives, and maybe the females in their lives. A lot of the cultures in the world are still, patriarchal. They still want to dominate their women. Right, Lisa? I think you're on mute.
There.
Okay.
Am I off?
Yes.
I was thinking along these lines too, is it may require a shift in ethical thinking to bring about changes in ideas. Just listening to what you guys are talking about, a lot of these movements have occurred hand in hand with a shift in ethical thinking or in different morality coming about. And I think that's happening right now.
A quick look on Facebook shows everyone's dissatisfaction with the current system.
Yeah.
How many different groups are there out there that are all, we need to change this, we need to fix this, stop that. But
Well, the only people that are not dissatisfied are the government workers and the corporations. They're happy as can be.
corporations are happy as pigs in shit. I again come back to how do we get this message out there along Nick's lines. That to me seems to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks.
Yeah.
So hence my ideas last week or a few days ago about propaganda. It's like let's use the psychological tactics that they use. They're effective.
Say that again?
I agree with you.
How do we get a gimmick or an idea that resonates with everyone? But you also, how do we get that idea to gain traction? How do we create that desire that, we see how things go viral. How do we get the millennials, Generation Y, to actually get onto that app that that hopefully will be created? And I think you also need a whole heap of other stuff there as well. We need information that people can access. Once they've opened up Pandora's box, they need to be able to sift through it. They need to be able to find all the stuff there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Adelina and I, various people here in Portland. And so that's basically what we've been talking about since July is how, and our conclusion, of course, was that we would just have to try, if we can just make the reward currency and the property portion real for people, that would be enough. At least that would be enough for them to, because once it's in your hands, once you see that you could, if you wanted to, you could have this much money, and if you wanted to, you could have this property, I think it's going to be hard to try to take that away from people. Let's talk a little bit about the property part of it, actually. Because, Nick, one of the things that we try to do was, in the beginning, we want to stay away from the idea of redistribution, so to speak, or taking things away from people. So if we're going to have an evolution, then the idea is that we should keep things as they are, by changing the fundamental rules, but that we should keep things the way they are, in the physical reality. Meaning, a person should be able to continue to own their own homes, tax-free, debt-free, etc. And that you would then begin a process of determining, if you have more than one house, determining how many do you want to keep. Because there's a lot of people that currently property is used as a means of investment, a way to make money, through property. And same thing with investments in stocks. It's the same thing. That's a property as well. You're trying to make money with money. Ironically, in America, and it's probably the case all over the world, certainly true here, the people who own property, who own, housing, offices, buildings, land, and or stock in corporations, those people pay almost no tax. When they do have to pay taxes, very little. Versus the only conversations that are allowed in America is, where should taxes come from? Should they come from the workers, or should they come from the corporation's profit? They never talk about the other two people who happen to own fucking everything, which is all the property and all the stock. Those guys get away by paying nothing. And meanwhile, they're making a lot more money than people who are working. We have people who in this country can earn $100,000. That's a decent amount. And then you got people who are making $100,000 because their stock went up. They don't pay anything. That doesn't even count as a part of the GDP. So anyway, I digress a little bit. I guess I'm getting mad at that system, but so
are you planning on cancelling all debt?
Well, obviously, if you're gonna start fresh with a new currency, what do you need? And we're not using debt anymore. Then of course all currencies would disappear. That means all debt is disappeared. That means whatever debt you have on your house is gone. It's your house. You have a title. It's digital. It's got your name on it. It's yours. But if you have 10 properties and you're renting out the remaining properties and you only live in your house, why do you have those properties? In the current system, you're allowed to be an owner of property as an investment, as a means of earning money. That's no longer the case. Now you're allowed to be owner of the property in the sense that it's yours to use, but not to make a profit from. Your property doesn't produce shit for society. It doesn't work. It's just sitting there. It's for use. So as a human being, I deserve to earn something for my time and my labor and my mind. And so anytime I do something, I naturally will earn reward, currency. However, a piece of property has value, but it's not going to be owned for the purposes of trying to earn reward on its own. So that means that the property that I'm currently renting out, I will no longer be able to collect rent from the people who live there, because it has to be owned by somebody. It's either going to be owned by the people who live there or by me. And so if I want to continue to own it, I won't have to pay any taxes, but I won't be able to collect rent. So the question is, what good is it to me? Am I going to just kick those people out and keep the property so that I can use it? I could. And in Common Planet, we're saying you can do that if you want to. Go ahead. But I suspect that most people are going to say, well, can I convert it? Can I sell it, so to speak, back to the system and get more reward for it? And then make it available for whoever else wants to, lay title to it. And the people who currently live there would have the first right of title. So the idea is to not cause massive displacement in the world. Let people live where they live. The current renters most likely will live where they live. The people who currently own their houses obviously would live where they live. And then the game begins from there.
I think that's a great wedge to get into people.
Say that again?
The rent seekers oppose that, but I think when you appeal and say we're going to stop rent-seeking behaviour,
right.
But at the same time, there's so many people that are socialising that if I get rich, then I don't have to work.
Correct. But you don't have to work anyway. See, in Common Planet, you're already rich, so to speak. You already have a house. You already have guaranteed income. You have opportunities. You have opportunities that even the rich don't have to some extent.
But just to give you some questions that you are going to get, how do we pay the reward if no one's working?
how do you pay the reward if no one's working? That's ridiculous to me. You're assuming that people will only do things because they get paid. I take the opposite tack. I think people are much more interested in having meaningful lives and meaningful work. So a lot of people do things right now with that are meaningful without pay. So to suggest that people are just going to stop doing things and just sit at home, doing drugs all day is ridiculous. It's not going to happen. We're naturally social beings.
But I'm not. I'm trying to think on what other people are going to say and think.
I understand, but
Okay?
so even though you have a place to live, even though you have these opportunities, your universal basic income is not going to be enough for you maybe to do the things other things that you might want to do. So you're going to need a little bit more.
Nick, I think the answer to your question might be, again, in that propaganda. So, you come back and, studies have shown elsewhere where this has happened that, people, when they transition from the current system to a new system, they tend to want to, take a break from society. So maybe, some people don't work for 3 months. They take 3 months off. But what we've found is that after 3 months, people really do want meaning back in their life again. And we're finding that, on their own course, they are heading back to work. And you just tell that story or whatever it is, you make it up and give them that answer. But you're right, you need to have the answer ready for them. But but I think if you answer it in a unique way that says, yeah, look, people want to take a break from this rat race that they've had, and it is a 3 months or 6 months, and they just chill out from society, and that's okay. And I could almost see that happening. As people want to transition across, we just stop working for we just have a 6 month break from productivity, and everyone just chills the F out for a while. And then we get back into, being more productive, but in a more, more humanitarian kind of, way.
There's so much I would love to do that I don't have the time to do.
Or the money.
Exactly.
Or the money.
Or the money.
There are classes downtown in various institutions I would love to go and take. I would love to participate, and I know they have space, but I can't because I can't afford it, and they can't. And they have the capacity to have more classes with other smart people. However, they don't have the capacity to pay them either. Whereas in Common Planet, they don't have to pay them. All they have to do is make the space available. So if there's interest there, it'll happen.
Okay. Just a little fact. Women in our society do 80% of the consumption. So I think if you are going to target a group, it's actually got to be the women of the world.
So
now I need a perspective on this, Lisa.
Please elaborate.
Okay, so currently women do the majority of consuming, and they are the shoppers of the world. It's a social thing to go shopping.
You must hang around different women than I do.
No, I agree with Nick. I agree with Nick for the most part. There, my wife is the same way still. My children definitely, my girls, no doubt. You're right, but in Common Planet, I'm guessing a lot of the production of that stuff will become more localized. They can get more involved. I think if you open up the opportunities for individuals, for the consumers, to be able to pick among various designs and or create their own designs and have things produced locally, they're going to be just as happy. So maybe the shopping habits probably will change.
What shopping? I mean, what sort of things is he saying that women are buying more?
They generally do the food shopping. They generally do the clothes shopping. They generally do those daily and weekly household purchase those household consumables, sheets. Whereas the men tend to, they'll buy cars.
Yeah, motorcycles, boats.
So you're saying it's a family dynamic?
Very much. I mean, this is just some sociological studies I came across a few years
Okay.
ago.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that. It's just,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we need to do the majority of domestic chores, and hence are responsible for those sorts of domestic pieces of consumption.
There will be some distributions and things. However, I think during the transition, if we all focused on food, making sure that we distribute seeds all over the world, and we start to educate ourselves a little bit more on food. Same thing with our schools, all the way up from every individual. So I think more and more people will become involved with food, as they should. So you focus on
Did
that
you have
because
a-
that's number one. And then you do medical and you do education, you do transportation. So you focus on those areas. As long as there's enough food for everybody and shelter, then we can fix everything else after that. I think that would be a benefit to the world.
Japan, 125 million people currently.
Mm.
Only able to support about 25% of its food needs without import.
That's it? Wait, say that again?
Japan is currently only able to support about 25% of its food needs from domestic food production.
That's not unusual for a lot
Yeah.
of countries in that same boat.
There's a lot of countries in the same boat.
Yeah. They're dependent upon imports. But the only reason why, though, Nick, is because they have the economic wherewithal to do that. So as soon as you get a little bit wealthier, you immediately begin to work less in the field, and immediately, if you can make a job by working in a bank, in Switzerland, why would you work in the field growing foods or in the farms? You're not going to be involved with that anymore. You're living the high life, so you don't care where your food comes in, as long as you can have the money to import it and spread the suffering and the labor to the poorer parts of the world. You do it.
The problem that Japan has is much more that they don't actually have the land to grow enough food.
Maybe that's in totality, but they can still improve the amount. You can still grow things indoors. You can have indoor grow towers where as a matter of fact, I think they are doing it right now in Japan. I think I've seen some videos of them having indoor grow houses of green foods. Yeah, they're growing all various lettuces and vegetables indoors in like a revolving LED system. You can do that. That can be improved. So that doesn't require, and that's nice and controlled and pesticide free and bug free. It's perfect. That can
So
be.
how does global trade fit in? Because I imagine there's going to be people that want to access tropical fruits and various things. And what happens when we have a country like Ethiopia, which is currently going through a food shortage?
Mm-hmm.
How does the world as a whole help them out under common plan?
Well, I'm not an expert in the food. I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I know that people can figure this out. Nick Lever, you have any answers on this one?
Oh, well, just in terms of the current problem we've got with food crisis, I think a lot of that is because of civil wars that are going on in countries, and it's stopping the aid from getting in there. I mean, there is enough, core basic food that they can that's around. They just can't get it in at the moment. So, and I think there's loads of models that have indicated that there's more than enough food in the world.
Yeah.
It's just that distribution model that's...
Yeah. I think the U.S., we're probably a net exporter, I'm imagining. We produce a lot. Mexico might be a net exporter, I don't know. Brazil probably. Australia, how are you guys doing on food over there?
7 times more food than we eat.
There you go. I don't think it matters where the food's produced. However, I think there needs to be an emphasis on more localized production, especially of things that are easy to do and cheap, like growing vegetables. I don't think it would hurt the world for people to be eating more green food rather than meat. And so
we've got a massive movement in Australia on local produce.
There's an awareness happening here too in the US with that.
I think one of the solutions around that is that, when you have a look at different, if you're starting from scratch and you can create, the perfect economic model, and you talk about, some of the things that you've already raised, you then have, what are these credits? I like to think of them as fun tokens. So, where you can go and spend your money in a fun way, or you might use it to buy some luxury items and say, look, I want the caviar. This is where I want to spend my,
but you would be
luxury
able to
money.
do that. That's the reward. You can. I'm not suggesting
That's
that
right.
you won't. There'll still be a market for that. You'll be able to buy that if you want. In supply and demand. If there's caviar in New York City, it'll have a price, and if you can afford it, you're going to buy it. So just like today's system, what's better, to have a system where everyone is stress-free, happy and producing, and some people within that system, obviously you're going to have a little bit more than others, but at least you level the playing field and nobody's suffering and we're all taking care of each other and the planet? Or should we continue to pollute the planet and stress and impoverish and malnutrition, and kill people? So the food part about it, I think we can improve. So they'll still be importing and exporting. That whole structure already exists. We're not going to stop that, and we don't want to. Likewise with health. Likewise with education. With education, that one is so easy. There are so many people who want to continue to get involved and join groups and go to classes, and they can't do that today because of the money. In Common Planning, you'll be able to do that because it doesn't cost them. As a matter of fact, you get paid for doing it. Whereas today, you don't get paid. Imagine you're a kid and you get to go to school and get paid. Well, that's how it would be. These children would be earning reward, not just for going to class, but for excelling as well. We can incentivize the students, with various bonuses. You can even have competitions of all kinds, because really, what really drives people? Money is not the only thing that incentivizes us. The feeling that we get when we do something good for others and or achieve something really good and get recognition for it, that's priceless. People will always, I think, compete for that. Lisa, you probably know more about this because you're more into psychology.
What's
Right?
that?
What motivates people is not just money. It's the idea that we can get satisfaction from being a good person, or from helping others, or achieving something that we didn't think we could achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about the food thing as well. You're talking about wanting caviar and things like that. I think maybe at the beginning of something like Common Planet, those might be issues that come up. But I could definitely see a shift more toward an eating to live and not living to eat mentality.
Wait, say that again? I think you may have gotten that backwards.
No,
You mean living to eat?
living to eat.
Because we're
Okay, I'm sorry. But, yeah, we don't need caviar.
no.
And
I don't
honestly,
like
I tried it. I don't like it. But once you get to grow your own food and things get more back along those lines, and you get children involved in it and helping others, and what they've done and show that does change people's attitudes, and you want to help out other people and do good things.
Can I just ask everyone, what was it that got you onto this path? What woke you up? Was that?
I don't think anything woke me up. I think I've always been on this path. I was interested in direct democracy in the late 90s when the internet first I started getting on the internet, and I thought, wow, this is how we could tap into people's collective thoughts and consciousness, and we could achieve some great things. And then I think, the rebirth of, or just seeing, the growth of things like Facebook has reinvigorated me a little bit. The movement to the kind of Bernie Sanders left, that socialist rising that's happening in America, I think has been, positive for me. But look, I'm going to keep harping on it to you guys because, I'm seeing, boxes of 5 people on the screen, and we've got 7 billion more to go. There's a long way to convince people. And there's a lot of work to be done. My view is that the system is broken and we need to fix the system, but we need to do it in a way that's non-confrontational to people, that, you know, they're not going to be worse off than they are now. And we are up against it with this massive media propaganda machine of the current system. It's a massive battle. You know, we're not the first people in history that have wanted to change the world for good. You know, it's a very difficult thing to do. But where we are in a favourable position is we do have the internet. You know, communication is now, you know, better than it ever has been in history. So, you know, the time is right for it to happen, but it has to be done, you know, in a way that brings people on the journey. And a lot more thought needs to go into that communication piece than I think, you know, than this little group is giving at the moment. When I just listening to, you know, before I was thinking about how else can we perhaps do this? I mean, what would be the minimum amount of people that you would need to have to create one of these societies that you're talking about, Remzi? You know, would it be 10,000 people? Would it be 100,000 people? You know, maybe that's the goal. You create one of those little societies, an island, or, you know, we find a bit of land in Australia and we create it and we show people that it's possible.
We know it's possible because life exists. So all we're doing is tweaking a couple of rules, not allowing the exploitation of people by other people, not allowing massive, you know, concentrations of power in decisions by individuals. So I know it's possible, but before we get into that though, I mean, you can't test the model, and it doesn't need to be tested. I disagree with that. The reason it doesn't need to be tested is because you would be starting with what you already have, plus extra money, plus opportunities, and build. But before we get there, I'd like to hear Nick answer his own question.
It's not testing the model, Remzi. It's being able to show people the model. Because sometimes people just don't believe, you know, they need to actually see a physical.
Again, I think if we had an application for this, we can actually test the model. It's maybe possible to utilize, you know, once you've built out the property portion, then we can figure out, do we have enough housing for everybody? And I think the answer is yes. In most, especially the, you know, countries like U.S., Australia, I suspect we have extra housing. In some places, they probably don't have enough housing. You know, I'm thinking of places like India, Brazil, some of the poorer countries where you have generations of people living with each other. Obviously, they don't have enough housing. But in America, I know for a fact there's buildings here that are owned, you know, that are just for purposes of property appreciation, for capital appreciation. But before we digress, Nick, go back to the question for you. You asked.
For me,
how did you get started?
My personal goal this year is to sort of study Edward Bernays. It's to study public relations and find out what works in terms of mass media and propaganda. To find those elements that trigger people into being influenced or at least looking at what we're talking about now. I haven't found the solutions yet, and not all of them. There are some that are out there that I like to look up. I can't recall any off the top of my head, unfortunately. But I think that's, for me, that is the issue at the moment, is getting the message across and unifying people behind a common cause. I see so many disparate groups out there that are all sort of pushing for the same agenda. They all want similar things, just with their slight twist on it, you know. So that's where I'm happy to do that research and try different methods of manipulation, I suppose, you know, social engineering.
Lisa, how about yourself?
Well, one thing I'm finding right now is with the indivisible movement, and that's in Australia, you all are into that, with the MoveOn.org and the indivisible. It grew, obviously, it was kind of grew out of the Tea Party and then we've adopted a lot of the same paradigms. And what's really become effective here is that we've formed a lot of grassroots, small, not even county-wide, where we only have maybe 25 to 100 people. But when we all get together and discuss the same basic ideas, and then those ideas move on to larger areas and larger areas and larger areas, and we're all saying the same thing. And that's why you see all these town halls being disrupted all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if there is a way to get this out into a lot of smaller groups and let it grow from there rather than trying to introduce it worldwide all at once. Just it's just a thought. I mean, it really is working with what we're doing.
The people who are currently in power, money, for me, I believe that money is the most powerful tool, obviously aside from information and people, but by itself, money is the most powerful tool in the world. And as long as the powers that be are continue to have the sole authority to not only control how much money they produce and is printed and issued via debt, but also to control the value. And what I mean, like, and then I kind of referred to this earlier where I said, my friend who's got 100,000 now, by the time he's 60, 20 years later, even if he had $1 million, it won't be enough because of inflation, because of the value of money. And the fact that there are hundreds of different currencies in the world means that the various people in power have a tool with, aside from military, to actually destroy another country, to destroy their opponents, like we've done with Venezuela. We've destroyed them because they were unwilling to cooperate with the powers that be in terms of their distribution of their oil and their pricing. And so they were punished. How were they punished? Their currency is now worthless. So, and it's the same game that these guys can constantly play with various countries. And it's the same reason why I think that oil is so powerful in the world is U.S. and Saudi Arabia, we're in bed together. It's the reason why we never talk bad about Saudi Arabia, because they have so much oil and so much power. All they have to do, them and their OPEC buddies, is decide that from now on they're not going to trade and sell oil to the dollar, but they're going to sell it to the euro or some other currency, and then all of a sudden the U.S. dollar would lose its value. They could kill us economically if they wanted to. Of course, they won't, though, because we also coincidentally, we also happen to be the strongest military power. So we're kind of in this, they're in this dance where they really can't dominate one another. But then you get rogue players who, like Russia, who are not strong economically, and or North Korea, and they too have weapons. So you get this very scary scenario where who knows what could happen. And that's going to continue as long as you have pockets of massive power, and it all comes down to the money. So
I'm sorry. I think I might have misunderstood your question. And I'm sorry.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if we can, by attacking their currency, if we can somehow get to people and show them they could have another currency, even if it's not real yet, like the reward. If we can just show them that here's your account. It could very well take out the value of the existing currency. If the people who have all the money now think that their system might be threatened in some way and the people are waking up, as we are, it could cause or they do it on their own. If they cause some kind of economic collapse in the world, like another depression or what have you, we would have this other currency already established where we can begin like this. Right now, we have the digital infrastructure. Most people have mobile phones. If they don't, they have access to a computer. So, and you can make available that currency right off the bat. So this is why, by the way, we structured the initial balance of the currency. We added a starting amount times a person's age so that there's no we can begin right now. We can figure out the details later. We can figure out the the transfer of your existing assets later. At least you'll have something so that you can continue to have a society, to have a world, if the other currency fails, as it eventually will, because all currencies, eventually have a collapse. No currency in the history of the world has been able to survive, and I don't think ours is any different. So that's my feeling.
So you want to approach it on a macro level rather than a micro level.
For me, everything's about the money. If you don't solve, if all you're talking about inequality is redistribution or some other thing, and without talking about the inequality, in terms of the power of the money, then you've solved nothing, and that you're just going to perpetuate the same game over and over and over again, and you solve nothing.
To answer Lisa's question, though, she's not specifically about the money. It's the fact that, and what I'm hearing too is that you really do want to change it on a macro level. You want to switch over the whole planet.
Correct.
To a completely different model. I don't think that's possible. I think you've got to do it from a grassroots level. I think you've got to show that it works. And you grow it that way. I think you're just not going to achieve it otherwise.
I think the problem we've talked about this in the past too, but if you do it with only one country, first of all, it's impossible, because you can't just, we're not just creating a new currency, you're creating new rules in terms of what you can do with that currency. And so how can you you can't separate yourself from the rest of the world. If we were to impose this economic model only on the United States, it wouldn't work, because the fact of the matter is we're completely dependent upon the rest of the world.
No one in the US is likely to embrace this, but Venezuela could very well implement something.
No, they can't either, Nick, because the problem is, the first question is, does Venezuela grow enough food for the population? If the answer is no, they're out. They're already dead. Because you can't use no other country is going to take your reward, because they don't use it. It's not an exchangeable currency with theirs. It has no value. So if I'm the United States, I'm a corporation, and I'm shipping products currently to Venezuela, they're giving me real currency today.
Yep. Okay. No, that works. But already within, sorry. Okay. I acknowledge that. But already within the UK, we're seeing towns that are developing their own currencies within a town.
Right.
Exactly.
And so they have a dual currency. They're still currently trading and exporting outside with normal dollars or normal pounds, but they've got their own internal currency.
Nick, could you send me some links on that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I can.
I'll be really interested to have a look.
So it's only minor stuff, but it's for local trade and to encourage local consumption of goods.
Yeah.
The legal tender within those towns. Now they can do that because of the legal sort of situation that they have regarding property in the UK. I can see that occurring in places that are quite socialist, like Venezuela and a few of the South American countries that are jaded with capitalism. Now, they're still heavily reliant on trade with other countries.
Right.
But it's a start, and these ideas are already out there. And I find around the world that there are the solutions to most of our problems.
It won't work, though, Nick, because as soon as you do that, the existing central banks will, again, even if you were to keep a dual currency system, you have the new reward and you have your existing currency. The existing currency still has a value relative to the other currencies in the world. They're going to destroy the value of this currency, so you will not be able to conduct trade with the rest of the world for the necessary resources that you need, because globalization is real. We're completely dependent upon trade, and so you can't separate yourself from the rest of the world. It's not possible.
Well, don't we already?
Russia tried that.
Don't we already do some of our economic transactions with Bitcoin and some with dollars?
Yep.
Well, sure, because again, Bitcoin has value right now, and they're not attacking it. I'm not sure why, but they're letting it take hold. I think the reason why they let it take hold is they figured better to have Bitcoin and this one particular currency than have another group creating something different using the blockchain technology, like what we're trying to do with reward, and creating reward. So this is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of another entity like us, or anybody for that matter, creating a universal reward that takes away their ability to control money. So that they figured if we allow, Bitcoin to exist only because they have a limited number of Bitcoins, and they're not proposing to eliminate current. So that's why they allowed them to exist. Anyway, Nick, back to your question. There was somebody sent me a whole bunch of links about the various other people who are doing those currencies. So if you go to that link I just put on resources, I created a new category at the bottom right, I think called money, maybe? I'm not sure what it's called. Or different currencies. So you'll see all the research that we've done on all the different currencies that people are creating. So it's a pretty good list. If there's more, let me know, but it's extensive. That one guy who did a lot of the research sent me the link, and I added a bunch of his. So it was good. He's the one who suggested it to me, actually. So I don't believe it can be done on a small. The only way it can be done is only in a country that's completely self-sufficient in terms of food. And I'll look at that link too, Nick. Thank you. So I think if you have enough food, medical, drugs, and all the other necessary tools, then you might be able to implement this. But no existing systems of power, certainly not the current central banks and the money people, they're not going to allow you to test this model out without punishing you. And so I don't believe it can be done. You can't test it. You can't implement it in one country. It's got to be global, and it has to be done that way. I don't see how it can be done any other way.
Now, when I said it on a grassroots level, I didn't say just in America.
How do you mean?
I mean, you have countries that still survive on barter system, and like Nick, you mentioned yesterday about the cradle to cradle, and some different alternative things that are happening throughout. And I think you can show people on a grassroots level, at least right now, that there are different alternatives out there. Rather than stick with the current system we have.
Yeah. One of our group members suggested that we, I was born in a small country, Albania, and so one of our group members suggested that if it was possible somehow, if you could raise a certain amount of money, either directly through the population or others, to utilize their existing currency and not tell the rest of the world that they're moving to this new model, and use their existing currency to buy all of the infrastructure and build their own factories and build all the things, all the tools that they might need to be self-sufficient, then you might be able to do it. But you can't transition to this model and then think that you're going to buy all those stuff afterwards, because you won't be able to, because they'll stop you. But if you can buy them first, become self-sufficient, then maybe.
Remzi,
And now you're talking about billions.
Would you buy a car without having tested it or seen it?
I see where you're asking, but again, I disagree, because this is not that, Nick. We're not changing the model to the extent that you're still keeping all the factories. You're still keeping all the production. You're not really changing anything. You're still keeping all the houses. All you're doing is tweaking a couple of the rules and saying, look, from now on, you're not going to allow it to make money just by money. The only way that you deserve anything is through your labor and time. And if we can agree on that, then we can move forward and work together. But as soon as you have money that can make money, or you can make money off of other people's labor, I'm out. I don't want to live in that world, because that's coercion. That's going to lead to wars, and we're going to be in this rat race that the world has been in forever. And so unless you get rid of that level of power, you're in the same game. So no.
I think I think that's one of the best marketing things of this whole idea, though, is that you are stopping people being rent seekers, being passive. You
Right.
know, so that is a real positive in selling this idea. I'm not opposed to that. I'm more concerned about getting the idea to everyone.
I know. I'm at a loss for that right now. I think the only way you can do it is with money. I think if you have a lot of money, you can produce, like I said, good videos, good clips, and you can gain some traction. And once you have some momentum and you have some production value, the message will spread. But until that day happens, this thing is not going to go anywhere. The message about the good food, the quality food, eating green food, all that's beginning to spread because there's a lot of money and production in it. But no one's produced anything about a new economic system. Nobody. And Nick Lever mentioned earlier the Venus Project. However, Nick, the problem with the Venus Project is that in order to go from point A to point B, point A being today, point B being a resource-based economy, the problem is that to be at the resource-based economy level presupposes that you've already built the machines to produce everything that, by the way, I love that vision, but I don't think it's realistic. And the reason why I don't think it's realistic is because, like I asked a person the other day, is that because people do own things. Things are limited. They're not unlimited. There always will be there needs to be a currency for exchange. For example, we own this laptop right here, okay? And so in a resource-based economy, this is my laptop still, obviously. But if I can't exchange this, if I wanted to buy a new one and give this to somebody else, why would I give this to somebody else unless I get something for it? So some people are going to hoard because there's no currency exchange value. So what would be the point? What's the incentive for me to give something to another person besides the kindness of my own heart? And some of us are good, but some people are not. So the system breaks down. There's got to be a currency of exchange, I think. I don't see how it could work any other way. And that's what they were missing. They were missing that key transition. The thing that we talked about was that this could be a transition model to it, and it will produce a lot of things that are free, just like in the resource-based economy, but there's always going to be, some items that are completely limited that have a value, and that can never be free equally. And the reason is because the question then is, who determines who gets what? And if the answer is some machine, which again is ultimately a group of bureaucrats or a group of people who are programming the machine, then I'm out. I don't want machines or other people to decide who gets what and what gets distributed. That whole system doesn't work for me. It goes against my anarchist thinking. Right? But this way, at least you're getting to the point.
You've got anarchist, Remzi. You've got an anarchist philosophy, and you believe in this future, but you're still living in our present system.
Correct.
How are you going to convince people that don't have an anarchist philosophy? I think you're setting yourself an impossible task. It's complicated for people to get their head around quickly. No one's going to sit. I mean, even if everyone in the world gave you an hour to sit and listen to what you're proposing, you're not going to convince people. You've got to transition them in a small, measurable way that gets them. I mean, you're talking about A to B in the Venus Project. Whatever project it is, getting from A to B. My view is the only way that you can do that is in small bite-sized pieces. It has to be a journey. You can't do it any other way. And that's going to create problems for you. I realize that because your model is based on a future model. But I think you have to come up with some adaptation models to get you along that journey, because it's not going to work any other way. I'm just going to call it out. I cannot see you're going to get the transition of 7 billion people across to a new model. Ain't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. We're not there either. We haven't figured that part out. But at least we have the tools today. At least we have the internet. At least we have mobile technology. So the tools that are necessary for the transition at least are here. So that's the beautiful thing. I wouldn't even been doing this if it weren't for those. We would never have gotten to this point. I would have stopped and just kept on being a capitalist. but we're not, because we know that it's possible. The tools are here. It's just a matter of spreading the message and how we do it.
The example, Remzi, I'll give you is the direct democracy one that I raised earlier. So, I saw the potential for that in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't take a programmer very much to come up with an e-vote system where everyone logs in and they say, look, what are your 5 or 10 most important priorities for the planet or for yourself? And everyone puts those in. A computer then spits out, what are the Earth's 10 greatest priorities? And how do we go about fixing them? How do we prioritise that? How do we make decisions on that? Well, we do that through e-voting. Now, that's a very simplistic possible solution for how to manage democracy on the planet. But even getting that in place is impossible almost in today's society because of the barriers that we're up against. How are you going to do that? That's just the voting mechanism. How are you going to do it when you're talking about a whole new financial model?
That's also part of the application. Ironically, we didn't talk about that. Yeah, the voting mechanism is built into the application. The neat thing about voting, people have this idea that voting is like you vote once and you're done, and the decision has to be locked in, and you can never change your mind. I disagree. I think voting should be more of a consensus at any given moment, such that allows you to be flexible to continue to make the right decision rather than being locked into the decision. So you can have a vote today, and then you can have another vote on top of that. I mean, you can build up various.
Sure, but you're missing my point. My point is that this e-voting thing is the way forward.
Yes,
it's
100%.
Very easy to put in place.
I agree.
The problem is, why hasn't it been put in place? We could have had this for 20 years now.
Right.
There's
no money.
It hasn't been in place.
Who's gonna
because
invest?
The system.
Who's gonna invest? The millions of dollars necessary to develop the technology and market it, and for what? Because remember now we live in a for-profit model.
I mean,
who's gonna do it?
A government could put it in place for the current.
They don't have the budget. Governments don't have the budget for it. Yeah. A nonprofit won't do it either because it's not sexy. No, they're not going to do it.
You've already got BitTorrent. Sorry, not BitTorrent. Cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And that is relatively secure these days. So that is the sort of security you need on online democracy, and it's already there in terms of cryptocurrency.
Yeah. The blockchain, by the way, is the same technology that can be used for the direct democracy that Nick talked about. And so I've done a lot of research in the past year about about Bitcoin and blockchain. So some really good stuff happening there. Those guys are convinced that they can do it all and that it's coming. So Nick, it is definitely possible. And now the technology nowadays is there. But what's not there, of course, is the reason to do it, is the drive. Because remember, we live in a for-profit model, and the people who have all the money, they have no desire to do that. So, like a Bill Gates guy, he's got a foundation. Mark Zuckerberg, he's got a foundation. They got billions, but they're not going to do it because they're happy the way things are. They're happy with their lifestyles and the power they have. And the truth is, like most people, they're afraid of change.
Have you heard of the 30-40-30 rule in marketing?
I've heard the 20-80 rule, but what's the 30-40?
There's numerous rules, but this one is basically 30% of people are generally going to agree with you, 30% are going to disagree with you, and there's 40% that sit on the fence.
I like that.
And they're the ones that you need to convince to get any meaningful change.
Correct.
So that's.
And
in terms of sociology, that's what I would be targeting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick?
You're spot on. That's the right principle. I mean, I think your numbers are going to be different to 30-40-30 when we're talking about what we're talking about here. Yeah. 50% of people are, basically living below the poverty line if you look at the whole world. So they're already on board.
No doubt.
I think if you can convince the middle class people in America, if you can convince the middle class people in countries like Australia, that's the people that are sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
Everyone else will come along the road. I think, for where I want to try and position marketing, it is that you know, the middle class aren't going to be any worse off. They're going to be better off under this model. But their biggest fear is that they're not. And the top percentage are always going to drive that fear and say, no, you're going to be so much worse off. Everything that you've worked for and your family have worked for, it's going down the tube. This is you know, rebadged communism. This is just a different way of selling socialism, and they're going to bag it. And you know, that's what you're up against.
Here's the beautiful thing, though. I mean, obviously, you guys said it's 100% true, but here's the beautiful thing, though, Nick, is that the people at the top, the 1% who definitely don't want to change and who will be pressing that propaganda saying shit's going to be worse off, guess what? Shit's already going to be worse off because it's only a matter of time till capitalism produces another devastating event. And so when that happens, their argument, now they can't make that argument. They can't say that system is bad when shit's already bad now. If World War III were to suddenly break out, how are they going to say things are going to be worse for you in a new model that purports not to have any war, that purports to have everyone have money? They can't, or it purports for everyone to have a house. So, you know, you might be able to lie to them, tell them that it's worse, but their own eyes are saying this is already bad. Now it's time to change. So you maybe, like some folks have said, your system is great, but nothing's going to change until shit hits the fan. So I think you're right. As long as things are hunky-dory and the stock market keeps going up and these rich companies keep making more profit, the middle class is going to be happy and they'll buy that lie. But as soon as things break down, and they're going to lose trust in capitalism just like we are, just like we have. And so I think that's going to happen quickly, by the way.
Hey, Remzi.
Yeah.
I've got to go to my mom's.
That's not allowed.
Sorry.
That's all right, Lisa. Thank you for joining us. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you this weekend.
All right. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Adelina.
So, but the truth is, though, guys, I don't want to see a World War III. I don't want the economic system to collapse. I don't want the world to go to shit before we make it better. No, I would rather be starting with something that's already healthy and make it better and go from there. That would be a better plan than allowing it to go to shit first.
Definitely.
So,
look, I think you use these negative events to build momentum, and that's where you start to get your critical mass from.
Yep.
And you know that's my view, is that you bring people on this journey, and that's what I'm trying to do with Organised Revolution. I don't know what the next stage is for us in terms of numbers, but you know, once we need to unify people on, you know, a better life and keep it that simple. Mm-hmm. And because the powers to be will do everything that they can to divide us, and they'll divide us on things that we can't agree on, and the things that we can't necessarily agree on or even understand are future models that, you know, you need to have a certain level of intelligence to get there. And you know, it's a real struggle to kind of, for me, to see how we're going to get to that plan B in a very quick amount of time. Whereas I think there's a lot that we can be doing now. Every time there is something negative that's going on, we use that as an opportunity to bring more members on board and say, hey, this is just another example of how the current system is failing us. And, you know, that propaganda that you're talking about, Nick, you know, that's why it's called organised revolution in terms of what I'm trying to do, because that's why revolutions have generally failed, because we're up against an organised capitalist society that, you know, that have got money, that they meet, that they have an organised way to push us back down again when we put our heads up there to try and, you know, achieve what we're trying to achieve. Sorry, Nick, yeah.
No, I was just going to mention, I mean, the capitalists use this. They've even got a term for it now. They call it disaster capitalism. You know, and they use disasters to further their own ends. Now, that's obviously in a profit-making sense. But if we use disasters to highlight issues and offer solutions that, along the lines that you were talking about, Nick, I think that's a fantastic method to garner support, make people aware.
I've got some I've got some disagreement in the grassroots meeting that I've got at the moment, but we're working through it. My view is, and I've always been against it, but my view now is that I think you need to run a negative campaign, because that's what the powers do. They run negative campaigns all the time.
I already did spell it right. I'm spelling it correct.
That's how you spell it.
I know, but watch. It's gonna change it. Watch. I didn't press small.
See?
How come?
I got it.
That was weird. Yeah, what you just mentioned, that disaster capitalism. Naomi Klein wrote a book like a decade ago, I think, called Shock Doctrine. Amazing. That woman she's ahead of her time. She's a really good advocate. Well, she's good at bringing awareness to all of the evils of capitalism, reining in capitalism and having an alternative. She can only do so much, right? For me, I think she was a good person to highlight all of these evils and so that led me to the realization that it wouldn't matter what group or what is producing this power or this money, that system is going to be perpetuated as long as money is able to pay people and control people. So yeah, we have some thinking to do in terms of the how portion. That's really the main challenge.
One of the biggest issues I currently see, and we talked about an element of this before, is people aren't aware. It's how do we actually make people aware? Oh, now I've forgotten my train of thought. My apologies. How do we bring about change? So, and offering better solutions is, the way.
Well, let's get off of this topic for a second. I think I'd like to get off that topic is because we're not going to figure it out right now, for sure. And maybe part of that answer is like what you just said, is bringing awareness. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the, share some more of the visions of what things might be like, rather than, the how part. Because we don't have the finances, we don't have the backing, we don't have the numbers, we have none of that right now, but we do have the vision. We can talk about that a little bit. That might help. So we mentioned a little bit about how education would be improved. Same thing with actually education would be completely transformed. The way that education is done today is in under the guise of producing kids with basic information, but more importantly, I think it's not really to educate kids, but it's actually designed to keep them away from the labor pool, so that they're not competing against adults. The truth is, their education should be much more flexible. They should be involved in a lot more of the adult things that we're doing, because it's possible that these kids, some of them are geniuses. They might have different ways of looking at things than adults do. So I don't see why kids can't be involved in some of the production, some of the factories, some of the infrastructure projects, some of the engineering, some of the medical stuff. Why not? Why can't kids be learning alongside adults? Wouldn't you agree? Working a job, as an engineer or any other job, you're learning too. When you're collaborating with people, you're learning. So it's another function of learning. So the whole education system would completely change when you begin to incentivize people to take classes and to educate themselves. They're going to do it, not only because they want to, but at least they have an incentive to do it too, I think.
In Australia, our education system is sort of currently set up to get you a job. So you basically get qualifications so you can go and choose your poison.
Right. That's exactly right.
Where do I want to work? But most people can't do that. And so many people fall through the gaps in terms of education. What we need is self-paced education, where it's a continual process, and people tick off the boxes as they go. As they do it at their own pace.
Yeah. Well, here's what I mean, Nick. Let's say you got a kid who, for whatever reason, he doesn't like reading. They're not into reading too much. They're more handsy. Maybe they're more mechanically involved. Maybe they want to get more involved in food. And so by keeping those kids away for 18 years of their lives, away from these opportunities, these education opportunities of how to grow food with seeds and different stuff, we're preventing having a base of knowledge basically. We're keeping kids away from exploring the things that interest and that they excel in. Let them expand more. We're keeping them rigid into English, history, science, and math, and that's it. And that's all you're allowed to do in school. It's ridiculous. Not everyone's going to be a scientist. Not everyone's going to be, an engineer. Not everyone's going to be. So why are we trying to train all these kids like one day they might be an engineer or scientist? Because they're not. They're not that smart, and some of them are too smart. And let them go now. I mean, so that's going to change, of course, education. The transportation, this one I love to talk about. The transportation I love to talk about is because we have the technologies today to build autonomous vehicles. They're already doing it. And so in the Common Planet, I can imagine that if it was my reward, I would direct my monies to the people who are doing that, to Elon Musk, who's building new batteries, solar technology, and let's build up that infrastructure. And so I can imagine a transportation system today wherein more and more cities develop autonomous driving vehicles and maybe other mass transport that are clean, renewable, maybe even solar powered, and that essentially are there at will. So you can eliminate traffic, you can eliminate pollute because you don't need to own the vehicle anymore.
I'm not sure if I mentioned this the other day, but I thought on one of the things I would love to do is provide a website whereby people can access information. And what is on that website is it covers, or I would ideally love to cover all of the things in the world. So in particular, let's have a look at the problems of the world. And we can highlight transport issues, energy issues, but at the same time, you offer solutions to those issues. And you get the greatest minds, you get academics and the smartest people. You don't have an open blog on this part of the web, or on this part of the page, but you have solutions there from all, I can see it from university that there's numerous great solutions to a lot of our problems.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can get people to vote on them, or I think I did mention it before. I think we've talked about this slightly, but people opinion on it. But in that way, you're giving people an option to input their ideas in a blog, and then they can be transferred over onto the main web page, and then people get to vote on the solutions that they think. And you give explanations as to why this is the best solution or this is not going to work, and you have those discussions. But you actually start to give people information that they've not seen before because it's tied up in academic journals or they don't have easy access to it. Now, if you want to go and access an academic journal, right, from some of the smartest people in the world, you're going to have to pay anything from $10 to $40 to get that. So information is when you want to get a message across, when you want people on your side, if you can show them these solutions, and Common Planet to me is one of those solutions economically, that's a really good start for getting momentum. And you're offering free information.
Yeah, it would be free.
I like that. I think that's a good idea.
Same. Well, these experts are already out there. These solutions are out there. Oftentimes their decisions are not chosen because of finances usually, though. For example, we need let's say we need a new bridge here in Oregon. We do. We need a new bridge connecting our two states. And it always comes down to money. Do they have enough money to build the bridge? And where should they build the bridge? Also comes down to money. It's not about, what the experts are saying. Here's what we need to do based on, hey guys, we shouldn't build it over here just because it's cheaper. We should build it over here because it's safer for if there's ever an earthquake. But, so if by allowing people to vote and the experts to make the decisions, those better decisions will be made.
Okay, so when the people come across those issues, you've already providing them with a solution to fix that problem.
But I don't see that as our job as EarthVote. I think my job is to, the way we see it is to change the structure to allow the experts to have the power so that they can attract the others and educate the others and the right decision gets made. So if we can give a platform to allow the experts to figure things out. That's more important than than us trying to bring them together. I think the network for those kinds of things already exists to some extent and can be improved, but let those experts, let the other people who are involved in that figure that out. I don't think that's our job.
Well, I just see my job. Well, the thing I would like to do is set it up so that the experts could do that.
Right. Well, that's why I think by changing the economic system, you would empower them to do that. By creating the system of a community credit, like I mentioned earlier, you would have the opportunity for the whole community to vote. Like the visions of Venus Planet, the way that he designed those cities, beautiful. I can imagine a whole office of engineers downtown developing all manner of city
It'd
plans.
be great if everything was designed that way.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to give an example though. Like when you go to a small village in India, okay, and the only information that those villagers get, they come from the trader or the merchant that brings their products once per week. And he's the only one that can read. And he's only reading from that local piece of propaganda, the newspaper that's produced in that state. Only half the people in the world have access to a computer. There's probably even less. But if they then have access to the information that I'm talking about, it can open up their minds, it can start discussion, and then they can, when they see, okay, we've got to this economic problem, how do we fund this? Then they see the common planet as a solution. That's where we get momentum. That's where you get people adopting the idea large scale. Because it's a great idea. It solves so many problems. And it might even be improved on once.
I think it'll allow people and communities to solve problems that we can't do today because of money. There's so many things that my city wants to do, but they can't because of so-called money. They cram these kids into the classrooms of more in her schools here in my town. Oh my God, it's got to be seen. How much?
Like 30 to 50 kids
in one class. That's embarrassing. And why? Because they don't have the budget, because they have to tax us more in order to be able to pay for the teachers. But in Common Planet, there's plenty of people who right now who don't have jobs, who would gladly volunteer and work as a teacher, so to speak, and help out, but they can't because there's no money, so to speak. Money's make believe, though. It's kind of funny.
You're in a similar boat to me, Remzi, in that you've come on this journey and you've been on this journey for a long time. So many people haven't even taken the first step.
They don't need to, though. They don't need to, I don't think. Initially, I thought the same as you guys. I thought perhaps we need to educate the whole world. I'm done with that. I'm convinced that there's too much apathy. Then there's, of course, some people are just educationally behind. We don't have the time for that. We don't need to educate these people. We just need to show them a vision of something that's better that they would like. And if we, just like in marketing, like you said, some kind of propaganda, if we can show them that this is better for you, you have something more desirable, then they're going to want it. If we show them a way of how they can have it via the application, so to speak, then they're going to take it. And then we can talk about when we can initiate that, so to speak, when we can start the revolution or when we can force because if enough people download the application and lay claim to a title to their house, and after a couple of years, if I've got millions of people using this application, if we all decide that we're not going to pay property taxes, we've basically taken out the whole entire capitalistic system. They're done. If a million of us in America decide not to pay taxes, the whole system is going to collapse. It's too much money.
If we all stopped working for a week, the same thing would happen.
Yeah, but that's bad because then we might starve.
Well, they're not going to starve in a week.
No, I disagree with that. That's a bad solution, Nick. No, the people will starve because you just mentioned earlier, remember, not all communities are growing enough food. Food needs to distribute. Maybe they don't store more than a week's worth of food. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
I'm sure people could go without food for a few days to instigate change.
No, I'm not a proponent of disrupting work. I'm a proponent of disrupting capital and the value of capital, but not work. We need to keep, producing things. That's because that's what life is all about. We need food. We need, things. Let's make more stuff in a good way, not in a bad way. So one of the other things too that I like to always talk about with capitalism is that in Africa, you've got poachers killing animals, right? And no one's paying those poachers, by the way. It's not like somebody saying, hey, listen, I'm going to give you, X amount of money as a job to go kill those animals. No, they're doing it on their own because the value of the animal, the horns or whatever they're killing it for, has a value, an exchange value in the market via cash. And so as long as that exists, they're going to continue to kill those animals. And so that's going to continue. Now, under Common Planet, those guys, first of all, that animal, that ivory, whatever, will have no value and will be able to earn an exchange value. So then the question is, are they killing these animals for as a trophy for hunting, or were they killing them as a because they needed to eat? They needed money, so therefore they didn't have enough jobs or whatever. They saw as an easy opportunity to make a little bit of money by going and killing the animal, so they go kill the animal. Same thing with overfishing. Same thing with the whaling all over the world with the Japanese. They're not killing the whales because they want to or because they desperately need to eat that whale meat. They're killing it because there's an opportunity for them to make a profit. Once you eliminate that opportunity, the whaling stops.
So Japanese with their whaling, it's not just profit-based. It's a cultural element from when the Japanese were starving in World War II and they started hunting whale. Okay, the Inuit tribes up in the Northern Islands, they've been hunting whales all their lives. That's the cultural element there.
Yeah.
But it was due to starvation during World War II that the Japanese started killing cetaceans, dolphins and whales. And currently they actually have to force the market. They actually have to get kids to eat the whale in primary school to maintain consumption. They've got massive stores of whale meat and dolphin meat.
Really?
And the other issue that they have is now their kids are getting heavy metal poisoning from eating these top 10 predators. Well,
good.
There are other ways to change. It's not, and there are other issues with overcoming cultural and ideological values that people have.
Right. Well, that's one of the neat things about when you go to a global model, though, is that through the voting mechanism, you can say, hey, look, based on the research that our scientists are doing, here's how many fish we think we are out there, and maybe this year we need to capture a little bit more. So we get to allow the ocean to heal, and therefore we're going to essentially ban fishing. So you can even punish things like that. And so I understand that it's a cultural thing, but at the end of the day, that's one of those cultural things that is also impacting the rest of us. And so it's not just culture. A cultural thing to me would be, I don't know, some kind of a thing that you do with some kind of ritual that you do for a wedding or something. That doesn't impact me. Or what religion you are, that doesn't impact me. But when it comes down to I think the environment and the health of our planet, well, that impacts me. I get to vote. And if I want to, I'll vote. I don't have to, of course, but if I want to, I will. So if I want to say, I think, I'm going to listen to the scientists and they say we should not whale this year, I'm going to say, yes, I agree. Let's ban it this year. And so that affects me. So anything that affects me personally, I think an individual should be allowed to vote on things for which they have a stake in it. If you don't have a stake in it, you don't get to vote. I don't get to vote, to not allow people to preach whatever religion they want. Go for it. I don't care. It doesn't impact me. As long as I don't have to do it. Right?
Yeah.
I disagree with you there. I think there's a difference. Like in Australia, we have compulsory voting. And I know we're talking about specific issues rather than politics or political parties or representatives. But it's a very grey area when you say, does religion have an impact on you? Because, it might have a direct impact or it might have an indirect impact. And I think, at the end of the day, I think everyone really should have a say in these kind of things. Also, the other thing that goes hand in hand with that, and this is my issue with promoting direct democracy now, is that you need to have much stronger education systems in place for people to be able to have and make educated decisions on issues that you want to put towards them. I think, if you ask the average Australian, about a complex issue at the moment, they just, they don't have the headspace for that at the moment, and you'd get a terrible answer from them. So I think you need to create better education models before you start putting the decision making into the hands of the common people.
Wait, so you're against the compulsory voting?
I'm for compulsory voting. I'm just saying that it's really critical when you're getting compulsory voting on issues that hand in hand with that is that people are educated. There's a process that people go through so that they fully understand the issues and what it might mean. But I think everyone needs to vote on issues. I think there are definitely some other examples that you could give that that aren't relevant. Do I need to have a vote on how the roads in your street are built? No, I don't. That's not relevant to me. So
well, maybe not to you, but it would be to me, so that I should have a vote on that.
Yeah, sure. So, and I quite like thinking of it direct democracy on the kind of layers of government that we have in Australia, probably similar to over there. We have federal issues, or in terms of EarthVote, it would be global issues. Then you have national issues. Then you have state issues or local issues.
Yeah.
Perhaps in Australia we could get rid of the state system and just have local issues and national issues. But you wouldn't have a vote on someone else's local issue.
Right. Well, the way I'm imagining a much more democratically open voting mechanism, in the sense that via the application, anybody can create a vote, so to speak. But the interesting thing is you can create layers of votes, meaning I can initiate a vote and say, hey, I want to, let's all vote on whether or not we should, like you said, maybe build the road this way. And other people can say, one underneath that, say, is this vote even valid? Right. So if enough people say no, that vote's not valid, then that vote can disappear. So there's ways to do it to get the consensus of people in multiple tiers, but still have direct democracy.
Nick,
I agree. I agree with that.
Yes, just with that direct democracy, I thought an extension on that, where on each issue that people get to vote on, they've got to read through the information first before they're able to vote. Now, I know that's
information, though.
Huh?
Yeah, well, that's it.
Take a test before they can vote. No, I don't disagree with that. I even think that maybe it's possible that some people who have more expertise in education in a particular field, maybe their vote should count more. Times 2, times 10. I'm not against that either, because the truth is. But I suspect that most people, once you have all these things, once you have free housing and you have all these opportunities, you're not gonna want to have a say. Why would you care so much to vote on something that doesn't even concern you anyway? So I don't see that as too much of a problem. Whereas today, I think people are more interested, so to speak, is because you have an opportunity to control other people, and or your fear that others might control you, so you get involved with that voting process. But in Common Planet, I don't see that as an issue, because you already naturally have everything. I don't see why you would care to intentionally sabotage something. I just don't see that is happening. At least I don't know how it would. Most people, they only involve themselves in politics for usually one of two reasons. Well, maybe three, but one of them is because you're already super rich and wealthy and powerful, and you want to maintain that. And so you feel like you're entitled to have your say. And of course, the other is if you're being repressed and oppressed and struggling, then you also want to have a say. And of course, the third one is you're a politician and you just want to make money. Next time, guys, what I'm going to do is we should do this again in the future. But what I'd like to do from each of you is we should probably exchange some emails prior to, and let's make it more organized this time. Maybe have a couple of questions that we'd like to ask each other, and have more of a roundtable discussion, because I feel like I'm doing too much talking. And so, What do you guys think about that? Would that work?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, that sounds good. So, okay, so Nick, that's your email. I think I already have it, right?
You probably do.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's always Facebook.
Yeah, of course. One of 10 different ways to connect, right? Fellas, this was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys.